Hey there. Welcome back to Nook Bedtime. Before we start tonight, make sure you're settled in. Lights dim, blankets pulled up, maybe the faint hum of a fan in the background. Because this story starts quietly like most scary things do. You don't always hear the terror right away. Sometimes it moves in with you. So let's begin. I moved into Mapleview Apartments on a gray Thursday afternoon, right after the rain. It wasn't much. A one-bedroom corner unit on the second floor, paint cracked around the windows, and a faint smell of dust and lemon cleaner. The kind of place that looks tired but still polite about it. The landlord, Ms. Alvarez, was a small woman with thick glasses and a voice like she'd been smoking since before I was born. She handed me the keys, gave me a half-smile, and said, "Don't worry about the noise. This old place creaks like it's got bones." At the time, I thought she meant plumbing or pipes. You know, the usual apartment soundtrack. Groaning walls, the occasional distant argument through the vents. But that first night, I realized she meant something else. I was unpacking boxes in the kitchen when I heard it. Thump, then a soft, slow shuffle above me. I froze mid-step, because my apartment was on the top floor. I looked up at the ceiling, a plain off-white surface, slightly bowed from age. I thought maybe it was the building settling, or some raccoon in the attic. But the sound came again, clearer this time, footsteps, slow and steady, moving from one end of the ceiling to the other. I grabbed my broom because apparently that's what my brain thought was an effective weapon, and tapped the ceiling once. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I laughed a little to myself. "You're jumpy. It's an old building. Relax." I went back to unpacking. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., I woke up, not because of a dream, but because of that same sound, footsteps. Only this time they were pacing, back and forth, slow, heavy, like someone walking in a circle above my bed. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe pipes expanding, maybe my brain making patterns out of nothing. But then the footsteps stopped, right above me. And from somewhere deep in the ceiling, I heard a faint, dragging sound. S-C-H-H-H-H, S-H-H-H-H, S-H-H-H-H, like something being pulled across the floor. Then a soft knock, once, right above my head. Talk. I held my breath, and then it was quiet again. The next morning, I asked Ms. Alvarez if anyone lived above me. She looked confused for a second, then laughed softly. "Above you? There's nothing above you. Roof access, maybe, but no one's allowed up there." I told her I heard footsteps. Her smile faded just slightly. "You must have been tired," she said. "This building makes strange noises at night. It's best not to listen too closely." Then she changed the subject. Quick, practiced like she'd done it before. That night, I tried to stay awake past 2:47. I watched old shows on my laptop, scrolling through job listings, anything to stay distracted. 2:45, I paused everything. The air in the room felt heavy, like the moment before thunder. At 2:47, right on time, thump, shuffle, drag. Exactly like before. Only this time, there was something else. A faint creak near the ceiling corner, where the drywall meets the vent. Then something scraped against the inside of the vent grill. A slow, deliberate movement, metal against metal. S-C-C-C-C-C-H-H-H-H. And then, I swear to you, I heard breathing. Right above me. The breathing didn't stop. It just stayed, soft and steady, like whoever or whatever was up there was trying not to make a sound. I remember lying completely still, afraid that even the sound of my sheets moving might make it hear me. But eventually, the rhythm of the breathing slowed, stretched, and faded. When I finally worked up the nerve to get out of bed, it was past 3:30. The air felt stale, thick with dust, and my room had that strange cold that doesn't come from temperature, like the air just forgot how to move. I turned on the light, scanned the ceiling. Nothing. No cracks, no stains, no holes. But the vent in the corner, the one that scraped, was slightly crooked now, just a few centimeters off, like something had nudged it from the inside. The next morning, I went down to the front office. Ms. Alvarez was behind the counter, sorting through a stack of papers, coffee steaming beside her. When she saw me, her smile was too fast, too practiced. "You settling in okay?" I told her about the footsteps again, the dragging sound, the vent, the breathing. She just nodded, eyes on the papers, like she was waiting for me to finish a speech she'd already heard 100 times before. "This building's old," she said finally. "Air ducts carry sound weirdly. Sometimes you'll think it's right above you when it's just the unit next door. But there isn't a unit next door," I said. "I'm on the end." That made her stop. She blinked once, then reached for her coffee. "Try not to worry about it," she said. "It'll settle down." And just like that, conversation over. That afternoon, I met my first neighbor, Mr. Fletcher, a retired mail carrier who lived across the hall. He was kind in that old-fashioned, lonely kind of way. We chatted about the weather, the leaky faucet in my kitchen, and how the elevator only worked when it felt like it. When I mentioned the footsteps, he got quiet. Not confused quiet, guarded quiet. "You hear them too, huh?" I felt a little relief. "So it's not just me?" He looked at me for a long moment, then leaned in, lowering his voice. "When it starts, don't knock back. Don't talk to it. Don't even think about going up there." I frowned. "Going up where?" "There's no." He cut me off with a shake of his head. I said don't. Then he shut his door. Just like that. That night, I didn't try to stay awake. I told myself it was nothing. Old wood. Air vents. The building exhaling after a long day. I crawled into bed, turned on a little white noise app on my phone, and stared at the ceiling until I drifted off. And then, right on cue, thump, thump, schhhhhh. The sound was heavier this time. Closer. It moved from the far end of the room to directly above my head. The white noise app didn't help. It almost made it worse, like the sound was weaving in and out of the static. Then the footsteps stopped, and from directly above my bed came a soft series of knocks. Talk, talk, talk. 3 slow knocks. I froze. Mr. Fletcher's warning echoed in my head. Don't knock back. I stared up at the ceiling, barely breathing. And then, before I could even move, talk, 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 talk. 6 knocks this time. Faster. Almost like it was copying me. Like it knew I was awake. When the clock hit 3:05, the sound stopped. Just gone. The silence afterward was so thick, I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I didn't sleep again that night. And the next morning, when I walked past Mr. Fletcher's door, there were 3 small dents in it, right at head height. Knocks. From the inside. The morning after the knocks, I didn't even bother pretending everything was fine. I looked like hell, bloodshot eyes, unshaven, half a cup of coffee cold on the counter. I tried sleeping in the living room, thinking maybe whatever it was stayed over the bedroom. But at 2:47, the sound had come again. Lighter this time, almost curious, like it was looking for me. I could have packed up, called it quits, found another place. But that's the thing about people like me, we always think we can figure it out, solve it, rationalize it, because the alternative is believing something you can't explain. That morning, I decided to meet more of my neighbors. If someone else was hearing this, maybe I wasn't losing it. The first one I ran into was a young woman, mid-20s, messy ponytail, holding a laundry basket like a shield. She gave me a polite smile. "Hey, you new here?" I nodded. "Moved in last week. Second floor." "Ah," she made a face. "Yeah, I used to live up there." "Used to." I tried to sound casual. "Why'd you move down?" Her fingers tightened on the basket. "Too much noise." My heart jumped a little. "From the ceiling?" She hesitated, just a breath too long. Then she said, "You'll get used to it," and walked off toward the laundry room. Next was an older man named Mr. Harlan. He lived directly below me, a retired watchmaker with shaky hands and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His apartment smelled like oil and thyme. When I mentioned the noises, he just stared at me for a few seconds before saying, "Don't feed it attention. It doesn't like being noticed." "It?" I asked. He blinked, like he didn't remember saying it. "Old buildings, son. They've got memory. You start listening too close, sometimes they listen back." Later that week, I caught Ms. Alvarez in the hall again, unlocking the maintenance closet. I tried once more. "Are you sure there's nothing above me?" "Because she sighed, already annoyed. "You're on the second floor. The roof is right above that. End of story." "But that doesn't make sense. There's a third row of windows from outside." Her keys slipped from her hand and hit the tile with a sharp clink. She bent to pick them up, voice lower now. "You must have counted wrong. We only have 2 floors." I opened my mouth to argue, but she straightened and gave me this look, a warning, not anger. Some questions don't get you answers. They just get you more questions. Then she walked away, leaving the door to the maintenance closet slightly ajar. And behind it, I could have sworn I saw a narrow set of stairs going up. That night, I decided to test something. I set my alarm for 2:40, turned on my phone's recorder, and sat in the dark with the ceiling light off and a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. At exactly 2:47, the first thump came, followed by the dragging. The footsteps crossed the room above me. Slow, deliberate, pacing. Then came a faint creak, like someone kneeling right above my chair. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then the sound stopped, replaced by something I'd never heard before. A faint, almost childlike humming. No tune, no melody, just a humming. And then, softly, almost playful, "Talk, talk, talk, talk." For knocks this time. The same rhythm as before, but different spacing, like it was trying something new, testing. I hit stop on the recorder with shaking hands. The timer read 2 minutes and 13 seconds of noise. But when I played it back, there was nothing, just silence. Not even the hum of the fridge or the faint hiss of the air vent. Just a flat, empty recording, like the microphone had gone deaf. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about those stairs behind the maintenance closet. Every time I walked past that hallway, it felt colder, like a draft was seeping out from under the door. I told myself not to go back, but curiosity's a stubborn thing. It scratches, it whispers, it crawls under your skin until you listen. That night, around midnight, I grabbed my flashlight and crept out into the hall. The building was dead quiet, except for the low hum of the exit sign and the faint tick of pipes cooling in the walls. The maintenance door was still unlocked. When I opened it, The smell hit me first, damp wood and something faintly metallic, like old blood on iron. The stairs behind it were narrow, steep, built from concrete worn smooth in the middle by years of footsteps. They led up into darkness. Halfway up, I paused. There was dust on everything except the steps. The dust ended after the fourth step, like someone had been walking there recently. I kept going, each step making a soft hollow sound, the kind you hear in big empty places. At the top, I found a small landing. Bare bulb, no switch, and a single metal door. Paint chipped, handle rusted, but the brass plate was still clear. 3B. I froze. 3B. Shouldn't exist. There was no third floor. I reached out, touched the doorknob. It was cold, ice cold, like metal left out in winter. I tried turning it. Locked. I knocked once, half joking, half afraid. Talk. From somewhere behind the door. Talk, talk, talk. I stumbled back down the stairs so fast I nearly tripped. The next morning, the door to the maintenance closet was padlocked shut. A new lock, shiny, silver, out of place on that old frame. I knocked on Ms. Alvarez's office door. "Someone's been going into the maintenance closet," I said. "You might want to check." She didn't even let me finish. "It's taken care of. There was a door up there." She stood, slow and deliberate, and stepped around the desk. "Whatever you think you saw, you didn't." Her tone wasn't angry this time. It was scared. "You keep your head down, pay your rent, and stop climbing where you don't belong." She closed the office door behind me. That night, I went to bed early, tried to, but I couldn't stop staring at the ceiling. Couldn't stop picturing that brass plate. 3B. At 2:47, the footsteps came again. Only this time, they didn't stop above my bed. They moved to the far corner, right where the maintenance stairwell would be if it continued up. And then I heard it, the sound of a metal door creaking open. It started with the dripping, that kind of slow, rhythmic drip that you try to ignore but can't. You know, the one that seems to echo through the whole apartment even though it's barely a sound. Plink, plink, plink. It was coming from the ceiling, right above my bed. First, I thought maybe a pipe was leaking. It's an old building. Cracked paint, warped floorboards, radiators that hiss like they're angry. But the longer I listened, the less it sounded like water. The rhythm was too steady, too intentional, like someone tapping. I remember lying there, staring up at the ceiling, phone light on, heart going just a little too fast. The plaster looked dry, but I could hear it, that wet, hollow sound, like something was dripping on the other side. I called maintenance the next morning. A guy named Don showed up around noon. He looked like he'd been working there forever. Jumpsuit half-zipped, hands stained with grease. When I told him about the noise, he gave me this tired look like, "Yeah, you're not the first one." But all he said was, "You said it's dripping? I'll check the lines." He went up on a step ladder, knocked on the ceiling with the back of a wrench, listened for a while. Then he frowned. "There's no line up here." "What do you mean?" "No pipe. Plumbing's all routed through the walls on this side. Nothing runs through the ceiling." He leaned closer, pressed his ear against the plaster. Then, slowly, he pulled back, pale, eyes wide, like he'd heard something he couldn't explain. "You ever hear voices up here?" he asked quietly. "Voices?" I laughed a little too fast. "No, just dripping." He wiped his hands on a rag, climbed down, and muttered, "If it starts talking, don't talk back." Then he packed his tools and left. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. I left the light on, sat in bed scrolling aimlessly on my phone, pretending I wasn't waiting for it. 2:40 a.m. rolled around. I felt it before I heard it, that weird pressure shift in the room, like when an elevator stops between floors. Then came the dripping. Plink, plink, plink. Only this time it wasn't steady. It was syllabic. 3 drips, pause. 2 more, pause. Like a pattern. Plink, 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 plink. I turned on my phone's recorder again, pointed the mic up, and that's when it changed. The dripping stopped. For a second, the silence felt alive, like something was holding its breath, right above me. Then, from the ceiling, soft, muffled, almost gentle, came a new sound, a slow drag, like fingernails brushing the inside of the plaster. Then, clear as day, a whisper. Hello! My throat went dry. I sat up, flashlight trembling in my hand, staring at the exact spot where I'd heard it. Nothing moved, but I could feel the weight, like someone was crouched on the other side, ear pressed to the same spot. Then it whispered again. Are you awake? I didn't answer, didn't breathe, because the voice wasn't just any voice. It was mine. When I played the recording back later, there was no whisper, no dragging, just static. But halfway through, something caught my ear. A faint, irregular tapping buried under the noise. When I slowed it down, it wasn't random. It was Morse code. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. So as someone or something was asking for help. The next morning, there was a brownish water stain spreading from that same spot on the ceiling. It looked almost like a handprint pressed from the other side. And when I touched it, it was warm. The whisper came back the next night. I didn't want to believe it, but denial's only useful until 2:47 a.m., the exact time the air starts to hum. I'd moved to the couch this time, hoping a different room would make a difference. Didn't. The sound found me anyway. First came the dragging, that slow, lazy slide of something heavy against wood. Then the whisper, faint, female, but speaking with the same quiet rhythm as before. Can you hear me? I froze. It was clearer this time, close enough that I could almost feel breath behind it. The ceiling light flickered once, twice, then went out. For a few seconds, the apartment was completely black. The kind of black that feels thick, like you could reach out and touch it. Then, from the ceiling again, please answer me. The voice cracked at the end like whoever, whatever, was speaking hadn't used words in a long time. I didn't answer, not out loud, anyway. But inside, my brain was screaming every question it could think of. Who are you? What do you want? What are you? The voice went quiet for a moment. Then, knock, knock, knock. Same pattern. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I felt the sound more than I heard it. It went through my chest like a second heartbeat. Then came another whisper. I'm cold. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, I'd convinced myself there had to be an explanation. A neighbor, maybe, playing a prank. Except there weren't many of us in the building anymore. The rent was cheap, sure, but lately doors had started closing. Windows boarded. Some tenants just left. The only ones who stayed were the ones who couldn't afford to leave or didn't have anywhere else to go. I found Mr. Harlan downstairs that morning, sitting in the lobby with his usual cup of bitter coffee. I asked him if he'd heard anything strange lately. He didn't look up when he answered. It's not strange if it's always been there. What's that supposed to mean? He finally met my eyes. That voice, it's not new. You just moved in after it got quiet for a while. Quiet. Things stopped after the fire. The fire. I'd heard something about that when I first moved in, an old story, maybe 10 years back. Supposedly, a small electrical fire had damaged part of the building, but nobody ever mentioned deaths. When I asked him, Harlan went silent again, staring at the lobby ceiling. "You don't want to know her name," he said. "Names make it real." That night, the whisper changed. It didn't start with my name this time. It started with someone else's. June. The word came soft, almost mournful, like a sigh dragged through static. Then again, a little louder. June. And then, help me. The next morning, there was news in the building group chat. One of the tenants, the girl from the laundry room, the one who'd told me she moved downstairs because of the noise, hadn't shown up for work. Her phone was off. No one had seen her since 2 nights ago. They said her door was locked from the inside. Maintenance had to break it open. The apartment was empty, lights still on, coffee still warm, but she was gone. Ms. Alvarez shut down any talk about it fast. Said the girl must have left early. Claimed she'd seen her moving boxes last week. But when I asked around, no one else had seen her. Her mailbox was still full. And that night, when the whisper came again, it didn't say my name. It said hers, over and over. "Tessa, Tessa, please." It's dark. I pressed my ear to the ceiling, heart hammering. The plaster felt warm, faintly vibrating, like something alive was just beyond it. And underneath the whisper, I could hear another sound. A slow, rhythmic thud, like fists beating from the inside. That was the night I decided to record everything, not just audio this time. I set up my phone on the nightstand, camera pointed up, screen dimmed. I hit record, sat in silence, waited. 2:46, the light flickered. At 2:47, the whisper began. June. My phone caught it, not just sound, but movement. The ceiling above my bed pulsed once. The faintest ripple, like something pressing down from the other side. Then a shape, a shadow darker than the dark around it, forming slowly across the ceiling. Long, thin, an arm. When I blinked, it was gone. But the next morning, there was a long crack in the plaster where it had appeared, jagged, almost like a scratch. I tried to play the video back, but the file was corrupted. All it showed was a frozen image of me sleeping, and faintly, in the top corner, something written in the dust on the ceiling. 3 letters, Jun. The 4th letter smeared away. The morning after Tessa disappeared, the building felt different. Quieter somehow, but not peaceful. More like the kind of silence you get when everyone's afraid to say the wrong thing. The hallways were emptier. The laundry room door was propped open, but the machines were still. Even Ms. Alvarez, usually stomping around with her keys jangling, was nowhere to be seen. For a while, I just stayed inside, pacing. There's only so much denial you can feed yourself before it starts to rot. The noises, the missing people, the door that shouldn't exist. It all had to connect somehow. So I decided to look for proof. There's a tiny branch library 2 blocks from Mapleview, wedged between a bakery and a pawn shop. The kind of place that still smells like old paper and wet carpet. I spent the entire afternoon there, hunched over microfilm reels and yellowed newspaper clippings, trying to find anything about my building. Took hours. But then I found it. A small article buried near the back pages of a 1997 local paper. 3 dead in Mapleview apartment fire. I remember reading that headline over and over. The article was short. No photos, no real detail, just a summary. It said the blaze had started on the 3rd floor around 3 a.m., likely due to faulty wiring. 3 tenants had died. A man named Robert Hayes, a woman named Marcy Liu, and another June Delaney. June. Apartment 3B. The fire department's report mentioned something else. Something odd. June's unit was the point of origin, but her body was never recovered. They found remains of the other 2 dental matches, clothing, the works, but in June's apartment the floor was collapsed. The file said it fell inward, like there was a hollow space beneath it, except there wasn't supposed to be anything below 3B. The ground plans only showed 2 floors. I asked the librarian if I could check the old property records. She looked up from her crossword and said, "You mean Mapleview? That place is cursed." Half joking, half not. Still, she led me to the city archives computer and helped me pull up the original blueprints. Built in 1968, 2 stories tall. Then a renovation permit filed in 1982 for roof expansion and additional maintenance access. That same permit was revoked just months later. No explanation, no follow-up work order. Just a note, handwritten across the margin. Do not reopen level 3. Structural risk. Containment required. Containment. I copied the number for the old property manager listed on the form. The company didn't exist anymore, but the name of the original inspector did. E. Hanley. By some miracle or curse, I found him. He was still alive, retired now, living about 30 minutes outside the city. I called. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thin and trembling with age. When I told him I was a tenant in Mapleview, there was a long pause. Then, "They didn't tear that place down?" I told him no, it was still standing. He sighed. "Then you've already heard it." Hanley told me he'd been the one to inspect the building after the 1997 fire. He said when the firefighters finally got inside, the 3rd floor was already gone. Collapsed, he said, but not from the fire. It was like something ate through the beams, he whispered. Melted them from the inside. The official report blamed wiring and structural decay. But Hanley told me the truth. We found claw marks in the concrete, like something had been trying to get out. I didn't say anything. I just listened. He went on. We sealed it off. The owners didn't want to rebuild, too expensive. So they bricked over the stairwell and called it a roof. But why not demolish it? I asked. Hanley's voice dropped to a whisper. Because it wouldn't stay down. The line went quiet after that. Then a faint sound tapping. Once, twice, 3 times. Talk, talk, talk. And the call disconnected. When I got back to the building, there was a new notice taped to the front door. Maintenance inspection scheduled. Water access restricted. The handwriting looked rushed. But what really got me, the signature at the bottom wasn't Ms. Alvarez's. It was E. Hanley. I went upstairs. The hallway felt colder than usual. Heavy, like the air was thicker somehow. There was a thin water stain spreading along the ceiling again, right above my door. The same pattern as before, almost like fingers dragging across plaster. And faintly, just faintly, beneath that stain, someone had written a name. June. This time, all 4 letters. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up reading every old article I could find, piecing together her life from scraps. June Delaney had been 27, worked at a flower shop downtown, lived alone. Her neighbors described her as quiet but kind. One even said she used to feed the stray cats behind the building every night, that they'd line up at her door like she was some sort of saint. But then, a month before the fire, people started complaining. They said she'd stopped leaving her apartment. that strange smells came from under her door, that they could hear something moving around inside late at night, something heavy. The last report before the fire came from a tenant in 2B, directly below her. He told police he heard footsteps pacing all night and something dragging. His name wasn't listed, but the address was the same as mine. I didn't mean to go snooping through the landlord's office. Not really. It just kind of happened. It was 2 nights after the phone call with the old inspector. I hadn't heard back from Ms. Alvarez, even though that inspection notice had her name on it. Her office light was off, but the door was unlocked. Maybe she'd left in a hurry. Inside, it smelled faintly of bleach and old coffee. Stacks of tenant files covered her desk, some of them open, some half-shredded. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I knew I'd recognize it when I found it. There was an old filing cabinet against the wall, rusted, one drawer bent out of shape. The labels were handwritten. E, F, L, M, R, S, Z. I hesitated for a second. Then I pulled open the D drawer, and there it was. Delaney, June, apartment 3B. The file was thin, just a rental application, a faded lease form, and one small Polaroid clipped to the corner. Her photo. She was standing in front of the building, my building, smiling like someone who didn't yet know she'd never move out. Late 20s, dark curls, tired eyes, but still kind. In the background, you could see the windows of the second floor. And just above her head, where the roofline should have ended, there was something else. A third row of windows. Faint, blurry, but definitely there. I stared at it for a long time. The light in those upper windows looked wrong. Not like sunlight, more like something glowing from inside. It wasn't the camera glare. It was too warm, too alive. I tried to convince myself it was just a reflection. But then I noticed something else. If you looked closely, just behind June's shoulder, in one of those impossible windows, there was a shape, human-sized, but too tall, its head almost brushing the frame. And the face, it wasn't a face, just a pale blur, like something pressing against the glass. That's when I heard the click. I froze. The door to the office had just locked. I hadn't touched it. For a moment, I thought Ms. Alvarez had come back. But when I turned, no one was there, just the faint hum of the building. The fluorescent light overhead flickered once. And from the ceiling, tock, 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 3 soft knocks. Right above me, I shoved the file into my jacket and yanked at the door handle. It opened easily this time, like it was never locked at all. I left the office and went straight back to my apartment. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat on my bed with the photograph under my lamp, studying every inch. I told myself I'd throw it away, that this was too far, that I'd gotten obsessed. But I couldn't stop looking, because the longer I stared at that photo, the more I noticed things changing. Tiny things at first. June's smile looked different. Not gone, just tighter, forced. The glow in the third-floor windows seemed brighter. And that tall, pale blur behind her shoulder? It wasn't behind her anymore. It was closer. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The picture hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. But I swear, for half a second, I thought I saw something move inside the photo, like a shadow passing behind glass. I flipped the Polaroid over just to break eye contact. There was a date scribbled on the back in blue ink. June 13th, 1997. That was 3 days before the fire. And beneath the date, in handwriting that wasn't hers, it was shaky, desperate. If you hear it, don't look up. I didn't sleep that night. The footsteps started at exactly 2:47 again. Slow, measured, like someone pacing directly above my bed. I lay there, clutching the photo, trying to ignore it. But then I heard something new, a sound that didn't belong, a soft scrape, then another, like fingernails dragging along the ceiling, and finally, a voice, so faint I almost thought I was dreaming, said my name, Eli, just that, clear as if someone was whispering through a vent. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just kept staring at the ceiling, the photograph trembling in my hands. And then I realized the voice didn't sound angry or threatening. It sounded lonely, like whoever it was had been calling my name for a very, very long time. When the morning light finally crept through my blinds, the photograph was gone. I tore the room apart looking for it, under the bed, behind the dresser, even inside the trash. Nothing. But when I looked up at the ceiling, there was a new stain. This time it wasn't water. It was brownish red and shaped like a handprint. It started with thunder. Not the dramatic kind, not the cinematic crack that splits the night in two. No, this was low and constant, like something big rolling in slow motion over the city. I was sitting by the window, watching the rain smear across the glass. The photo of June was still missing. I kept expecting it to show up somewhere, tucked in a drawer under a pillow, like the building had decided to give it back. But instead, it gave me something else. Silence. For 2 days, no footsteps, no whispers, nothing. I should have felt relieved. But silence in this place didn't feel safe. Felt like something waiting. By the time the rain turned to sheets, the wind was howling through the alley. The lights in the hallway flickered like they were being breathed on. Ms. Alvarez had posted a notice earlier that day. Storm warning. Stay indoors. She taped it crookedly to the mailroom door, her handwriting jittery like she'd been rushing. And below it, in smaller print, she'd written, "Do not go to the roof. Do not go upstairs after midnight." I told myself it was a joke, but jokes don't usually come with underlined warnings. Around 9:30, the power went out. It was one of those blackouts that happens in stages, the TV first, then the lamps, then the quiet hum of the fridge dying last. I sat there for a few seconds, listening to the sound of rain instead of electricity. And then, somewhere above me, came a dull thud, like something heavy shifting its weight. At first, I thought maybe it was thunder. But thunder doesn't have footsteps. And these weren't just footsteps anymore. There were several of them. Soft, uneven, like more than one person pacing in circles directly above me. It was 2:47 a.m. Of course it was. I checked my phone. Battery at 37%. No signal. Perfect. I lit a candle, one of those cheap lavender-scented ones from the dollar store. Its little flame threw long shadows across the walls. The footsteps kept going. I counted. 1, 2, pause. Then 3 more. Then a dragging sound, something being pulled across the floor. Except there was no floor up there. Not anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the hallway. The entire building was pitch black. The exit signs were dead, and the air had that thick, warm smell, like wet dust and something faintly metallic. I passed apartment 2C. The old man who lived there, Harold, had a habit of keeping his TV on all night. Usually, you could hear the muffled sound of late-night talk shows. But tonight, nothing. I knocked. No answer. Just the sound of rain hitting the windows in rhythmic waves. And somewhere far down the hall, maybe near the stairwell, a faint drip, drip, drip. I aimed my flashlight toward the end of the corridor. The beam caught something on the floor, a wet footprint. barefoot, small. It led from the stairwell toward my apartment door. I followed it back, shining the light over each print. They stopped right outside my unit, and then turned around, heading back toward the stairs, like someone had come to my door and then changed their mind. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was one of the tenants, maybe panicking during the blackout. But then I remembered something. No one else lived directly beneath the roof. Just me. And whatever left those footprints had come from above. The thunder cracked louder this time, closer. I flinched and nearly dropped the flashlight. That's when I saw it. A shape at the end of the hallway. Still, watching. It was just outside the range of my light, standing near the stairwell door. Tall, thin. At first, I thought it might be Harold or maybe the woman from 2A. But when I called out, "Hey, is that you?" the shape didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't breathe. I took one slow step forward. The light wobbled, and the shape was gone. Just empty hallway. But something about the air felt wrong now. Heavier, thicker, like static before a lightning strike. I backed up, step by step, until I was inside my apartment again. Closed the door, locked it. Then I sat on the floor and listened. For a while, all I heard was rain. Then, talk, talk, talk. 3 knocks. Not from the ceiling this time. From the walls. I pressed my ear to the plaster. Something was moving inside. Not crawling, sliding. Like fabric being dragged through a tight space. Every few seconds, it brushed right behind the drywall, just a few inches from my face. I whispered, "Who's there?" and immediately regretted it, because the answer came, not from behind the wall but from above. A whisper that seemed to echo in the ceiling. "June." My candle flickered out, instantly, and in that darkness, for one horrible second, I saw, not with my eyes, but somewhere deeper, a face. Pale, featureless, pressed flat against the ceiling like it was trying to push through. I stumbled backward, flashlight shaking in my hands. When I aimed it upward, there was nothing, just the ceiling, and a single drop of water falling from a new crack near the corner. I didn't sleep that night. The storm raged until dawn. At some point, the emergency lights came back on, dull red glows filling the hallway. But in the soft light of morning, I noticed something new on the floor near my bed. A photograph. June's photograph. But it was different now. The third-floor windows weren't glowing anymore. They were open. When the power finally came back that morning, everything in the apartment felt wrong. Like the blackout hadn't really ended. It had just gone inside the walls. The photograph still lay on the floor near my bed. I picked it up. It was warped from moisture, edges curling inward like it had been soaked and dried too fast. And those windows, the ones that used to glow faintly in the photo, they were open now. Not broken, not cracked, just wide open, like whatever was behind them had finally stepped out. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself it was some trick of light or memory. But when I looked up, I saw the first crack. It ran jagged across the corner of my ceiling, right where I'd seen that drop of water fall during the storm. At first, it looked like water damage, the kind of thing you'd see in any old building. Except the crack wasn't drying. It was spreading, slowly, silently, like something was pressing against it from the other side. I grabbed my phone and tried to call Ms. Alvarez, the landlord, straight to voicemail. Then I tried Harold from 2C, nothing. Even the building's Wi-Fi was down. It felt like the whole place was disconnected from the world. Just a concrete box floating in the middle of the city, surrounded by rain and static. That evening, around 7 o'clock, the storm started again. A second wave, darker clouds, heavier rain. The lights flickered twice, but this time they stayed on. I thought that was a good sign, until the ceiling started to breathe. I don't mean literally, but that's the only word I can use. Every few seconds, the plaster would bulge outward, just a little, and then sink back like air being pushed against a balloon. Then another crack split open, this time right above my bed. The sound it made was like paper tearing underwater. A faint hiss followed. I climbed onto a chair and shined my flashlight up close. The crack wasn't just splitting, it was pulsing, like veins. And from inside, there was a smell. Sweet at first, then metallic, then unmistakable. Rot. I called out again. "Hello? Is someone up there?" But halfway through, my voice cracked, because I heard it. Movement. Something was crawling above the plaster. Not footsteps this time, it was faster, lighter, like fingers tapping and skittering in circles. Every so often it would stop, and I swear I could hear it listening. I backed away, keeping the flashlight aimed at the ceiling. My shadow stretched long across the floor, jittering with every flick of the light. That's when I noticed the paint on the far wall starting to bubble. Tiny blisters forming in clusters, one after another, until they burst, releasing a wet, gray dust that smelled like mildew and rust. The sound from above grew louder, scraping, dragging. Then something heavy shifted. The ceiling flexed downward, bending under the weight. I didn't even think. I ran for the door, but as soon as I opened it, I realized the hallway lights were out again. Complete blackness. Somewhere in the dark, someone else was moving. Footsteps echoing unevenly down the hall. Not the steady rhythm of a neighbor walking. No, these were frantic, barefoot, like someone was running away. Then a slam. A door shut hard at the far end of the corridor. And silence again. I closed my door and leaned against it, heart pounding so loud it felt like the building could hear it. That's when I heard the voice, faint, from the ceiling. It was a woman, whispering, "Don't look up." Everything in me froze. Every instinct screamed to do the exact opposite, to look. And, of course, I did. Slowly. Right above me, a hairline crack split wider. A black slit running across the plaster. Something dripped from it. Not water. Thick, dark. I took a step closer, flashlight trembling. And for the first time, I saw movement through the crack. Something pale, wet, pressing gently against the break, testing it. Then a sound. Not a voice, but a deep, low moan, like wind through an empty bottle. And the ceiling bowed downward. That's when I realized it wasn't just the ceiling giving in. It was the floor above it. Except, there wasn't supposed to be one. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the broom, and used the handle to prod at the bulge. It recoiled fast, like whatever was on the other side had felt it. A heartbeat later, it struck back. A heavy, solid bang from the inside, hard enough to make the light fixture rattle. Then another, and another, each one stronger, faster, like fists pounding from the wrong side of a wall. Plaster started to flake down in white dust. Tiny bits at first, then chunks. The air filled with that sharp, dry smell of gypsum. I coughed, covering my mouth. Through the haze, I could see it now. A shape pressing through the plaster, stretching it thin. It wasn't a head. Not exactly. More like the outline of a face. Too long, too narrow. Sliding beneath the surface like something swimming just below the ice. I took a step back, tripped on a chair, and fell hard. The flashlight rolled away, spinning light across the walls until it landed facing upward. The ceiling was cracked wide open now, and from inside that darkness, two pale hands gripped the edge of the hole. They were small, delicate, like a woman's, but the fingers were wrong. Too many joints, too long, bending in directions they shouldn't. Then silence again. The hands withdrew slowly, leaving behind smears of something wet and gray. The storm outside hit its peak, thunder rolling right over the building. And in the next flash of lightning through the window, I saw a face in the hole, just for a split second. Eyes wide, mouth open, skin white as plaster. June, or what was left of her. I screamed. I don't even remember doing it. When the lights flickered back to life, the hole was empty. Nothing but cracked plaster and dripping water. No face, no hands, just the faint sound of footsteps retreating upward, through the ceiling, and then the creaking stopped. I didn't move until morning, didn't sleep, didn't even blink for a while. When I finally dared to look again, the crack was sealed, like nothing had ever happened, except the plaster had dried in strange, finger-shaped ridges. 5 on one side, 5 on the other, like something had been holding on. That was the night I stopped pretending the sound above me was just the building settling. Because buildings don't whisper, and they definitely don't hold on. If you've ever lived in an old building, you know that the laundry room is the kind of place you only visit when you absolutely have to. The fluorescent lights hum like they're holding back a secret. The tiles are chipped. The machines clang at odd hours. And the smell, well, that's a smell you never forget. I was standing in that room after the storm, the ceiling incident still rattling my nerves. Every creak and drip felt like it was meant just for me. I wasn't supposed to ignore it anymore. That's when I noticed it. Panel. Not one of the usual maintenance doors with peeling paint and authorized personnel only signs. No, this was tucked behind the dryer in the far corner, half hidden by an old mop bucket and a stack of detergent boxes. It didn't have a handle, just a seam, faint, almost like a hairline crack running along the edges. I pressed my fingers against it. Cold metal, smooth, solid, and then a sound, a whisper from above, so soft I thought I'd imagined it. Come closer. I froze. Of course I did. Who wouldn't? And then the seam shifted. A little, just a millimeter at first, but enough to make me realize it wasn't sealed shut. I crouched down, flashlight clutched in one hand, heart hammering. The panel gave way under my push, and with a dull click, it swung open. Inside was a narrow crawl space, not down as you'd expect in an old building, not into the pipes or the water heaters. A tight metal ladder, rusty in spots, leading straight toward the ceiling. I shouldn't have climbed it. I knew that, and yet I did. Each rung creaked under my weight, the echo bouncing up into the unknown above me. The walls were close, so close my shoulders brushed the metal on either side. My flashlight barely illuminated a foot ahead. Dust motes swirled like tiny ghosts in the beam. And then the smell hit me. Rot. Decay. Something long dead and long forgotten. I swallowed hard and kept going. The ladder ended at a small door. A real door. Metal, bolted shut, and numbered. 3A. I paused. The numbers were odd, out of place. I knew the building. There were only 2 floors. 3A? 3B? 3C? My flashlight trembled in my hand. I could hear something breathing behind one of the doors. Slow, shallow, patient, not human. I didn't know what it was, but I knew one thing. It had been waiting, and now it knew I was here. I leaned closer to the first door, 3A, listening. The air was thick. My heartbeat drowned out almost everything, but I could hear that faint, wet sound, like someone dragging a blanket across the floor. Then I realized it wasn't the floor. It was the ceiling. Above me, whatever had been walking or crawling or watching me from above. It was here. I swallowed, forcing myself to keep going. 3B, the middle door. My hand hovered over the handle. It was cold, too cold, like the metal had been chilled by something unnatural. A whisper slipped past the door. "You shouldn't be here." I froze, but the curiosity, the kind that makes your brain scream danger, danger, pushed me forward anyway. The handle turned. The door swung open with a slow, deliberate creak. And inside, well, that's the next part. Because the thing in apartment 3B wasn't just above me anymore. It was waiting. I stepped through the door marked 3B, and immediately, I noticed something strange. It wasn't a room. Not exactly. It was alive. Not like it breathed exactly, but the air itself had weight. Thick, damp, like the space had been holding its breath for decades. Dust clung to every surface, but not randomly. It was layered, deliberate, like someone had been careful about how time settled here. The floor creaked under me. Not wood, not concrete. Something older. Something hidden beneath the building's 2 floors. I moved slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam caught a table. On it, a tape recorder. Old, dusty, 1980s vintage, and still playing. Softly, I froze. Static hissed before a voice came through. A woman's voice, calm, almost hypnotic. "If you're hearing this, it's already too late." I swallowed, my throat dry. Then I noticed the furniture. Old chairs, a sofa with cracked leather, books stacked neatly as if someone had left in a hurry but wanted everything to stay in its place. A calendar on the wall, frozen on May 1984, felt frozen in time. And yet, I wasn't alone. A sound drew me to the corner of the room. Soft dragging, wet, unearthly. I shone my flashlight across the floor. Nothing, just the shadows stretching in impossible angles. And then I saw it, the ceiling above this hidden room. Metal beams, pipes, and boards. Some of them warped, some broken, and through a gap I glimpsed movement. Something small, humanoid, but wrong. Limbs too long, a back arched at an unnatural angle. It froze the moment my light touched it. And then, the tape recorder spoke again. It waits, it feeds, but it listens. Always listening. My heart pounded so loud I was sure it could hear me. I wanted to turn back, run, slam the door behind me and never look up again. But something kept me rooted in place. Curiosity, madness, maybe both. I noticed a stack of papers beside the table. Notes, scribbles, diagrams, charts of footsteps, timings, sounds. Room after room, apartment after apartment. The patterns were drawn like a map. And there it was, 3B. Not just this room, this apartment. The building had a 3rd floor once. A real 3rd floor. And whatever had lived here before, it hadn't left. I felt a breath on my neck. Not my own. Slow, cold, wet. I turned sharply, nothing. But the tape recorder clicked off. Silence. Then a whisper from somewhere above. "Do you want to see me?" I stepped backward. My flashlight beam landed on a shadow stretching along the far wall. Not cast by anything in the room. It moved on its own. I realized it was waiting for me to look up. And I wanted I wanted to, but I didn't, because I remembered every story, every warning. Curiosity kills, they say, but in this case, it feeds. I took a step back, pressed myself against the wall, and listened. The room didn't breathe anymore. It didn't move, but I knew it was still there, watching, waiting, and I was trapped in apartment 3B. The tape recorder sat on that old wooden table, staring at me like it had been waiting for my fingers to press play. Dust coated it thick, but the red recording light was faintly blinking. Somehow it was still alive. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to run. Another part, the part that always gets me into trouble, was drawn to it. I pressed the play button. The static hissed first, long and grating. Then a voice, soft but sharp, filled the tiny, decayed apartment. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. I froze. The hairs on my arms stood up. The voice was delicate, almost melodic, but it carried weight, a kind of desperate calm. I used to live here, apartment 3B, or I guess it was 3B, before the fire, before everything went wrong. I wanted to tell someone. I wanted someone to know, but no one listens, and you won't either. Not really. The tape clicked faintly as if it were shifting, the speaker's breath audible, ragged, like it had been recorded in a hurry. They came before me, not people, something else. It lived above me, in the ceiling, in the walls. It fed on a curiosity, on fear. It waits always, and I was too greedy. I wanted to see it. I wanted to know what it was. So I tried. I felt my chest tighten. Goosebumps. I could almost hear footsteps above me, or maybe it was my imagination. Maybe I was imagining it. It's not human. Not really. It waits for someone who listens. Someone who cares enough to look. Someone who notices. It knows everything, and it doesn't forget. The tape hissed again, and then a sound I'll never forget. Faint, wet scraping, like claws across old wood. I fed it, I think. I don't know. I thought if I gave it what it wanted, if I gave it enough, it would leave me alone. But it never does. And the people, the tenants, they don't know. They think the building is normal, safe, but it's not. And it's still here. I hear it when I sleep, when I dream, and it listens to you, always. I shivered. My hand hovered over the recorder, wanting to stop it, but something compelled me to keep listening. If you found this, don't follow the sound. Don't try to see it. I thought I could control it. I thought I could feed it in small doses, but it never stops. And I'm gone now, or maybe not. I don't know. But if you ever hear the footsteps, don't look. Just wait, and hope you're lucky enough not to matter to it yet. The static grew louder, harsh, crackling, almost angry. It's patient. It waits above. It watches. It learns. And it doesn't like surprises. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe you'll listen. Maybe you won't. But whatever you do, don't. The tape cut off abruptly. Just a long, low hum in the silence. I sat there, frozen, heart hammering. My flashlight beam trembled across the room. Nothing moved. Or maybe I didn't want to see what was moving. I realized then, this wasn't just a room frozen in time. It wasn't just a tape recorder playing a voice from the past. It was a warning, a very specific, very real warning. And I had stepped right into it. I left the tape running, walking slowly around the apartment. Furniture layered in dust. A calendar from 1984 frozen on May. Everything untouched, as if the occupant had just disappeared. Then I noticed it, marks along the edges of the ceiling. Tiny scratches, some wet, some dried. Patterns, like someone or something had moved above the ceiling, pacing, waiting, watching. I realized June hadn't been lying. She had lived with it. She had fed it. And now I had a choice. I could leave, close that door and never speak of it, or I could keep going. I knew what I had to do. I pressed my hand against the wall near the tape recorder, trying to steady my nerves. The soft whisper of the machine filled the room again, the faint static now almost like breathing. And somewhere above, I could swear I heard a footstep. One, slow, wet, patient. After listening to her voice, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. The way she phrased it, I fed it. I kept turning the words over in my mind. Fed it? What does that even mean? The apartment was quiet, eerily quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled like old wood, mildew, and that faint metallic tang that makes you instinctively sniff your own hands. I checked the tape recorder again. It was still blinking softly, even after decades. It didn't need batteries, it didn't need anything. It just worked, as if it was meant for me to find. And then I saw it. Not immediately, not in the first sweep of my flashlight, but as I stepped closer to the corner near the window, I noticed something odd on the floor. A faint outline, like a dark stain, circling a small portion of the carpet. At first, I thought it was just spilled water or the result of the fire years ago. But then I realized it had a shape, pattern, a circle, and around it tiny scratches, thin, precise like claws. I swallowed hard. My pulse quickened. June's words echoed in my head. I fed it, I think. I don't know. I thought if I gave it what it wanted, if I gave it enough, it would leave me alone. And now I understood. She hadn't been feeding it food. She'd been feeding it attention, fear, and herself. I remember hovering over that circle for what felt like hours. My brain refused to label it. Was it just imagination? A trick of the shadows? Then I noticed something else, the ceiling above the circle. It looked different. Not damaged, not burned, but like the wood itself was pulsing slightly. Very faint but alive, like something breathing just above the plaster. I don't know why I touched it. Curiosity, maybe. The same curiosity that had trapped June. But as soon as my fingers brushed the surface, a cold shiver ran up my arm, straight to my spine. A sound echoed, not from the tape recorder, not from the room, but from above. A scraping, wet, deliberate. And then I heard it. A whisper, not a human whisper, not a friendly voice. A low, guttural sound that formed words only in the mind. Feed me, feed me, feed me. My legs locked. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over the chair. My chest felt tight. My lungs screamed for air I couldn't seem to pull in fast enough. I could almost feel it above me, pressing down through the ceiling. Something patient, something that had waited decades in silence. It wanted me, and June, she had known exactly how to survive it. Or at least, survive another night. I glanced around the room, scanning every inch of dust-covered furniture, every forgotten trinket left behind. On the table, I noticed a small notebook. I hadn't seen it before. Its cover was brittle, faded brown leather. The pages inside were filled with scrawled handwriting. June had written instructions, not long passages, just short, frantic notes. Never look when it scratches. Never follow the noise. Whisper back if it knocks, but only 3 times. Feed it fear, not yourself. Her words hit me like a punch. Feed it fear, not yourself. That made no sense. How do you feed fear? How do you give it just enough without letting it consume you? I sat on the edge of the chair, reading and rereading. The apartment seemed to grow colder with each passing minute. I thought about the faint footsteps I'd heard above my own ceiling over the past weeks. Slow, deliberate, unrelenting. Now I understood. It had been patient, waiting, watching, for someone careless enough to slip. And I had slipped. I realized then that June's feeding wasn't about survival in a literal sense. It was about appeasement, a balance. You had to satisfy it without letting it fully taste you, without letting it mark you. And the circle on the floor, that was her last attempt at a protective measure. Maybe she had drawn it. Maybe it was meant to confuse it. I didn't stay to test the theory. My hands shook too badly. I backed toward the door, leaving the notebook and the tape recorder behind. The air felt thicker with every step. It wasn't just the apartment. It was above it. And somehow, I knew it could feel me noticing it. As I slipped into the hallway, I looked back once. The faint glow of the tape recorder's red light flickered, like a heartbeat. The shadows of the furniture stretched across the floor, leaning toward me in the dim flashlight beam. I didn't dare breathe too loud, because something in apartment 3B had been waiting for someone just like me. And now it knew I was here. The first knock came the night I moved back into my apartment after leaving the building to clear my head. I had spent the day cleaning up some of the dust in 3B, just to see the apartment in the daylight to remind myself I was still sane, or at least convince myself of it. It was exactly 2:47 a.m., because of course it was. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, half drunk on stale coffee and adrenaline. I had read June's notes over and over, but nothing prepared me for hearing it again, in my own apartment, directly above me. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. Pause. 3 more. Pause. Then another set. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm. And that rhythm, it was communicating. I waited, heart hammering, trying to calculate the intervals, to figure out the pattern without moving a muscle. I traced it in my mind. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks, a pause. Exactly 32 seconds between each set. Whoever or whatever it had been consistent for years, maybe decades. I started keeping a journal the next night. I didn't want to admit to anyone that I was counting ceiling knocks, but I had to know. And it quickly became clear. The knocks weren't just a warning. They were a message, a warning wrapped in a game, a code. The pattern repeated every night at 2:47 a.m., never early, never late. Sometimes it would start softly, almost hesitant, as if testing me, then gain volume, pounding through the thin plaster above my head. Other nights, it felt urgent, like it was angry I wasn't responding. I tried to time my breathing with it, imagining some fragile balance that would keep it from noticing my awareness. I noticed small changes. Occasionally, there would be a 4th knock, almost imperceptible, a hesitation in the rhythm, like it had stumbled. But it always corrected itself in the next set. It was alive in a way I couldn't name, a mechanical patience mixed with a predator's cunning. Then I began to notice it wasn't alone. First, it was just above my ceiling. But sometimes, when I sat very still, I could hear a second, lighter set of knocks coming from the apartment next door, or perhaps the hallway. They mirrored the main pattern but with slight variation, like a second voice in a duet. I wondered if other tenants had heard it, had been listening in the same way, counting the time between sets, trying to understand. Or if June had been the only one who had ever noticed. I tried to sleep through it, tried to ignore the rhythm, but that was impossible. The pattern embedded itself in my mind. I would wake before it started, anticipating the first 3 knocks, counting the 32 seconds, bracing for the next set. It didn't matter if I closed my eyes or looked away. The pattern had already found its way into my brain. One night, in a moment of foolishness, I knocked back. Just once, lightly, trying to test the boundaries. Nothing happened immediately. I waited, tense. Then came the response. A rapid staccato set of 6 knocks, then silence. My blood ran cold. I realized it hadn't expected a reply, and now it knew I could hear it, and worse, I could respond. The next night, I stayed up waiting. I traced the pattern meticulously, pen on paper, counting every second. The knocking adapted, subtle changes in tempo, some sets faster, some slower, almost teasing me. Felt alive. Not in a heartbeat kind of way, but in a calculated, patient way. It was learning me, studying my reactions, testing the limits of my tolerance. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. It wasn't just above my ceiling. Sometimes I could hear it in the walls, faint scratches, like nails on plaster, following the same rhythm. The entire building seemed to participate in it, or maybe it controlled the building itself. I didn't know which terrified me more, the idea that it was everywhere, or the idea that it had been waiting all this time, biding its time until I arrived. I became obsessed with the rhythm, the pattern. It was maddening. Nights blurred together. I could no longer tell if I was hearing the knocks or imagining them. Sometimes I woke up at 2:47 a.m. in panic, only to realize I had dreamed them, only for the real set to follow seconds later. Eventually, I realized I wasn't documenting the pattern to understand it. I was documenting it to survive it. Every knock became a pulse of dread, every pause a chance to catch my breath. And every night, I felt it watching, judging, growing more aware of my awareness. The pattern wasn't just a warning. It was a ritual, and I was now part of it. I never expected to reply. I told myself that over and over. Don't knock back. Don't engage. Let it have its pattern, its rhythm, its whatever it was. But some part of me, the part that couldn't sleep, that couldn't ignore the ceiling, that had been counting every pause, every third knock for weeks, wanted to see what would happen. So I waited until a night when exhaustion and obsession collided. The apartment was dark, the kind of dark that swallowed every corner, made the shadows thick and tactile. I sat on the edge of my bed, a pencil in hand, my notebook open on my lap, and waited for 2:47 a.m. It started softly at first, the 3 knocks, spaced out exactly 32 seconds apart. I timed them, recorded them, traced them in my mind, heart hammering in anticipation. And then, as the 3rd knock ended, I took a deep breath and tapped back once, lightly, almost hesitant, on the ceiling above me. Immediately, the response came. The knocks accelerated, 6 rapid strikes, then 3, then 2, then a single lingering tap. Each one landed in a rhythm that was both deliberate and taunting, like it was mocking my courage. I froze, fingers pressed to the ceiling, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break ribs. It wasn't just knocking back. It was communicating, and it understood. I tapped again, a little bolder this time. The response was immediate. The ceiling vibrated beneath my hand, and for a moment, the sound changed. No longer just wooden thumps. There was a resonance now, almost like a low growl vibrating through the plaster. I yanked my hand back, staring at the ceiling in terror, but a part of me wanted more. The knocking began to form patterns that I couldn't quite interpret at first, irregular sequences that seemed random but carried an intelligence. a deliberateness. I realized that this was no longer a one-way interaction. It was a conversation, and the language, I couldn't understand it, but I could feel it. Every knock carried emotion, intent, anger, curiosity, hunger. It was alive and it knew I was awake. The next night, I tried a more structured reply. I waited for the 3-knock set, paused 32 seconds, then replied with 3 taps of my own, mimicking its pattern. The ceiling seemed to hum with tension. The response came in a rush this time. Taps, scratches, even a dragging sound that ran along the beams above, like something heavy shifting. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that my replies had consequences. The creature, or whatever it was, reacted to me. It was aware. I started keeping detailed notes, sketches of the rhythm, trying to map it, understand it. Every night, the pattern grew more complex. Sometimes, there were sudden bursts of rapid knocking, almost musical, almost playful. Other times, long, single strikes that made the plaster tremble, like the ceiling itself was breathing in warning. And then the first words came. I swear I wasn't imagining it. One night, after tapping back, there was a pause, a silence so thick it pressed against my skull. And then, faint, almost imperceptible, a whisper came through the ceiling. Why? Not my name this time, just the single word. But it carried weight, curiosity, something that felt like recognition. My stomach dropped. I tapped again, one short, deliberate knock. The response was immediate. A series of 3 knocks, then a soft dragging sound, then a hollow, low rumble. It was as if the building itself were vibrating, responding to the rhythm. Couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, listening, tracing the vibrations, feeling them through the floorboards, through the walls. It was everywhere, or it could reach everywhere. And it was learning me. The following nights escalated. Each time I tapped, the responses grew more elaborate, more complex. Sometimes the knocks would form arcs, patterns I could almost read like Braille, as if it were sending me messages I couldn't yet understand. Sometimes it would pause, testing me, waiting for a reply that I didn't dare make. I started seeing it in the shadows, imagining shapes above the ceiling when I glanced up. I told myself it was paranoia. I told myself it was stress. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving above me in ways I couldn't see. That my replies had drawn attention. That the knocking wasn't just a warning anymore. It was engagement. And with engagement came danger. Because it wasn't just knocking anymore. It was aware of me, learning my habits, predicting my responses. Every night, I felt it getting closer, pressing down, as if it were preparing, waiting for the moment I would make a mistake. I didn't know if I was supposed to continue, or if replying had condemned me. But every night I tapped back, because I couldn't not. And every night the ceiling answered. It started subtly, the way a storm begins with just a flicker of wind through the trees before the clouds fully gather. The apartment felt heavier than usual, like the air itself had weight. Even the street outside was quiet, as if the city knew something was coming. I'd been expecting it. Part of me had been expecting it ever since I first replied to those knocks. But anticipation didn't make it any less terrifying. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I moved through the apartment on instinct, checking doors, windows, even the ceiling. I could feel the vibrations before they started. A faint hum in the plaster, like something was moving, pacing, ready. I sat in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, waiting for 2:47 a.m., the hour that had become an obsession, a curse. And then it began. 3 knocks, sharp, precise, And then a pause, a silence that stretched far too long. My hand hovered over the notebook again, but this time, I didn't reach out to tap back. Couldn't. There was something in the rhythm tonight, something deliberate, heavier. The knocks weren't just knocking. They were deliberate steps, moving across the ceiling in a pattern that made my blood run cold. The ceiling creaked. A low, grinding groan followed, like wood bending under weight, but heavier, wrong. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in a building this old, this fragile. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to convince myself it was the building settling. But it wasn't. This was above me, and it was alive. Then the dragging started. A long, scraping sound that ran across the ceiling joists, over the beams, across the plaster like claws over stone. It moved with intent, stopping just above my bed, and the vibrations ran through the floorboards, shaking my teeth. My body froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. And then the first crack appeared. A thin, jagged line that ran along the plaster ceiling, spiderwebbing slowly outward. Dust fell like fine snow onto my face and shoulders. I realized with a cold, sinking dread that it wasn't the building settling. It was coming down. It was breaking through. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flee, but I couldn't. Something had learned me, had been tracking me, and now it was here. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to escape, but the apartment felt like a cage, each wall pressing inward. The ceiling above me groaned again, louder this time, and the cracks widened, exposing the darkness above. And then I saw it. At the edge of the largest crack, something moved. A shadow, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, stretching down into my apartment. It didn't have a shape I could name. Limbs? Maybe. Hands? Possibly. But its form was wrong, jagged, fragmented, a silhouette of something human yet completely alien. It paused, hovering just above me, and the room vibrated with its presence. The knocks had stopped. The silence was unbearable, charged with intent. I could feel its awareness, sharp and probing, as if it were studying me, reading my fear, learning my rhythm. I tried to speak, to call for help, but my voice wouldn't come. My notebook fell to the floor, pages scattering like leaves in a storm, and the creature shifted slightly. The air changed. It wasn't just heavy anymore. It was wet, thick, almost viscous, like I was breathing through syrup. The ceiling trembled, and I realized it was only a matter of seconds before it would fully break through. My heart hammered, my lungs burned, and my body wanted to collapse, but I had nowhere to hide. I could hear the floor above crack, groan, splinter, and then, slowly, deliberately, it lowered itself further into the room. Every rational thought screamed to me that this was impossible, that nothing should exist like this. But I could see it and I could feel it. My life, my sanity, every shred of belief in normality had collapsed. And then it stopped, just above me, inches from the ceiling, almost as if it were listening, waiting, testing me one final time. I don't know how long I stayed frozen there, unable to move, unable to breathe, but I knew one thing. This was the last night, and I knew it was coming for me. The first thing I remember is the sound of the ceiling shattering, splintering, collapsing under something impossibly heavy. Wood cracked, plaster rained down in choking dust, and the vibrations weren't just in the floor anymore. They were inside my skull, rattling my teeth, making my bones hum. I couldn't move, couldn't run, couldn't even scream. It came down slowly at first, testing me, probing the space around me, like a predator lowering itself to strike. And then, without warning, it hit. The impact threw me backward across the room. My shoulder slammed against the wall. My notebook, the only record of everything, flew into the darkness as the ceiling groaned, screaming under the weight above. The lights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the apartment in an instant, the storm outside hammering the windows, the thunder mingling with the groans above. I fumbled for my phone, anything to record, anything to capture what was happening. My fingers brushed the device, and I hit record, holding it up like a shield, even though I knew it wouldn't save me. Then I heard it, its voice, or at least what passed for a voice. The knocking had stopped. The whispers had stopped. There was a low, wet, resonant sound, like something dragging its limbs through thick mud, punctuated by a rhythm that sent shivers straight to my spine. I couldn't comprehend it, but my ears, my mind, my body recognized it as communication. And it was aimed at me. I tried to speak into the phone, to leave a message, to explain, but my voice was ragged, hoarse. I could barely manage a whisper. I don't know what want. My words trailed into nothing. It responded. A series of rapid thuds and scraping sounds answered me, each one pressing into my chest through the vibrations in the floorboards. I could feel them in my teeth, in my throat, as if it were inside me. Then came the movement. Something massive shifted above me, and the ceiling began to descend again. Slower this time, deliberate, measured. Dust fell like snow. Plaster cracked in arcs that traced the room like spiderwebs. I could see faint shapes now, twisted shadows forming as it pressed closer. Limbs, or what resembled limbs, reached down. One of them brushed against the bed frame, cold and heavy, making the mattress groan. I raised the phone higher, trying to record everything, to capture proof that I was here, that I saw it. The screen's dim light illuminated part of its form. Jagged, fragmented, limbs that seemed to bend and twist in impossible angles. A torso that shimmered almost like smoke. A shadow that was solid yet wrong. And then the worst sound, the sound of it moving across my floor. I could hear the boards crack beneath its weight. Every step was a message, a sentence, a threat I couldn't understand. I fell to my knees, holding the phone out in front of me, tears blurring the screen. I realized I was trapped, completely and utterly at its mercy. Paused. There was a beat of silence, almost contemplative, and I swear, even in that chaos, I could feel it studying me. Then it struck again. The floorboards splintered where it landed. Dust and debris rained down. My phone wobbled in my hand, and the recording picked up my shallow, ragged breaths, my pounding heart, every crackle and groan of the apartment as it shook. I tried to stay quiet, thinking maybe silence would save me, but it didn't matter. Whatever it was, it knew